Hey guys, Gabriel Varga. We're back with my series where we look at the best fighters in the world. We break down why they're so good in training tips you can use to be a little bit more like them. Now, by very, very popular request, we're going to be looking at Israel Adesanya and specifically his striking. I've broken out my MMA gloves, left all the kickboxing gloves behind me, and because I'm new to MMA, I'm not even going to try and break down why he is so good at avoiding the takedown. We're just going to be looking at his striking, what makes him so good, and how you can drill to be more like him. Alright guys, Israel Adesanya. He's an amazing kickboxer, no doubt, but his move to UFC was just perfect. Aside from the little loss he took recently, but let's not focus on that because jumping up a weight class is so much to ask of anybody. He is still amazing. And let's start off and get right into it by focusing on his kicks and something specific about his kicks which I really like. What I want to talk about is his ability to transition from the front kick up to the round kick so fluidly, and he's able to do it with stance changes as well. So if he's normally in his orthodox stance, he'll switch, he'll pump the front kick out and then come up with the head round kick. Now I want to talk about two variations of this, and number one, which you do see him do occasionally, is the Brazilian kick. The Brazilian kick, which we're not going to focus on as much today, is spectacular, but I really want to look at his ability to come up with the front kick and transition into the head round kick. Now this is very reminiscent of karate style kicking, and it's something I used to do quite often for point fighting. We'd be bouncing around, we'd go 1, 2. Now I don't utilize it much anymore because the power behind it is fairly minimal. But he makes it work and he still throws it, and I think more than anything his success comes from people being a little bit intimidated by the kick, and it manages to help him create the distance which he really likes. So the tip for getting this one going, for utilizing this kick correctly, is to start off, get yourself something to hang off, and just work your ability to go from a front kick. As you re-chamber, you transition your body over, and now you're in that perfect round kick position to land the shot, hopefully without anybody's hand there. If somebody sees the front kick coming, they go to block incorrectly, they leave their head open. Now the 1, 2 becomes perfect. Now one of the main things you guys are going to note on this kick is this foot that you're standing on. Everything stems from what happens here. If I do not pivot this foot at all, I come to my front kick, I try to transition to my round kick, and my hip mobility is limited by that foot not turning over. But if I turn it over too early, especially if I want to do a Brazilian kick, a preemptive full pivot is not as good for this kick. So what I really want to get focused on, very good at, which he does very nicely, is lifting up and then transitioning the pivot during the kick. Again, spectacular technique. You can work it in your sparring, in your shadow boxing, whatever you want, where you come up, you touch once. Maybe hands out longer like him, you touch. And then you just work from there to there. And one of the tips that I have to make this kick more successful is to utilize your eyes as a fake. So if I come towards you and I'm looking up, because I know that's where my fake is going to come. I'm kicking low to fake, but I'm looking up. It doesn't sell. But if I really look down, I look at that stomach, I touch it. I look at the stomach, I touch it. I really look, and then I transition. It is much easier to sell that kick. It's much more likely that the person's going to fall for the feint, and you will be successful with this shot. All right, guys, point number 2. I want to talk about Israel's fakes. His ability to fake a shot and have a reaction, a very dramatic reaction come out of it. And faking is one of those things that is super underutilized. And if you are somebody who likes distance, if you don't want to be standing here the whole time banging with somebody, you want to maintain distance, you have to have a reason to stop them from just walking in. Somebody's getting ready to move forward and you are feinting, or you're popping the hand out, and it gives them that pause, that concern for a split second, like, oh, I'm going to attack. Okay, no, I'm not, because I see that little shot coming. So first, I want to talk about Israel's ability to fake the low kick. He utilized this beautifully against Paulo Costa. Israel did a beautiful hip pump. I take my hips, which were in their normal position, you know, whether it's square or not square, depending on your stance, and then all I'm doing from here is just turning my hip over, taking it to the lead, and most likely I'm disconnecting my back heel. I'm making sure that it disconnects to allow this hip to get maximum distance to really sell the shot. So if I'm standing here and I'm in my stance and I want to pump this fake, I just twist, and that gives that same motion as throwing a kick because the hip moves. It's about the turn and that hip mobility that comes with the kick. Now, another beautiful fake that I've seen him use, which I want to draw attention to, is his jab. We're going to look quickly at a clip of him utilizing the fake over and over in one of his glory fights. He just pumps it, and he's constantly getting a reaction, keeping that distance which he wants. He just pumps halfway. He pumps halfway to get that little reaction. And again, it's something you guys can practice. Just bounce around, you know, let your normal shots go. You're throwing, letting those arms just flow, and then you just fake. You just pump your hand out halfway. You can pump your hip if you want, push your arm out. You're just looking for that ability to basically twitch halfway through the punch and then rechamber back. I constantly remind myself in training camps, focus on the fakes. Conservatively, I would say it's very, very reasonable to have at least 10 to 25% of all your shots in a fight be fakes. So the next time you guys are doing shadow boxing or bag work, remember, not everything needs to be long and actually touching. You can just stand from the outside, you can bounce, and you can pump your fake, and then you touch a couple times, and you pump a fake, and you're just making your opponent, your imaginary opponent, just a little bit on edge, a little twitchy, always thinking that something's coming when it's really not. For our next point, guys, I want to focus on Israel's footwork and specifically maintaining his distance with backwards movement. He is so good at this. He'll be touching somebody, he'll be touching, they go to move forward, and he's just gone. It's so quick, it's so fast, and a very important point, I'm not going to focus on this too much today, but you will note very often when he backs up, he takes an angle. That's something that you learn very early on in fight sports. It's not straight back, straight back, straight back. It's backwards and then just cut a little angle. It's much harder for somebody to attack you. They're attacking if they have to be changing directions. Now, a way that's perfect to just work what he does is basically have yourself on the bag, have yourself shadow boxing, and have sporadic moments where there's a trigger that's going to indicate for you to move backwards very quickly. Because if you preset things in your mind, you know, I'm hitting the bag, I'm working away, I'm like, oh, okay, I think when I finish this combo, I'll back up. Everything's on your terms, everything's dictated by you. But if you're working the bag and you hear a beat, and then you're back on the bag, you're touching, you're doing your thing. You're waiting for that touch, that little contact, and then the beat comes and you're back. So I could just be easily doing this drill, no problem, by just having somebody either behind you just say, go, go. And that's when you back up. Israel is also very good with his hands as he backs up. He doesn't keep them right here. He's very long with his arms as he backs up. So if he needs to make the transition to defending a takedown, he's there. But he can also control a lot of things with his hands. He can control somebody getting too close. So I'm moving around, I'm touching, I'm faking, I'm doing all my thing. And then I hear the beep and I just move back. Spectacular drill to do if you are not a pressure fighter. You're not somebody who wants to be crushed into that phone booth style fighting. He does it so well. With some training, some practice, you guys can get so much better at this. Moving along, guys, we were talking about Israel's ability to touch the opponent light. Very little of what he does is hard shots. And I think that's one of the reasons that his footwork works so well. He doesn't very often get himself down really low, grinding in on hard shots. He's up high. He's able to touch and utilize that footwork that we just talked about. This is something that Lomachenko is also very good at, switching up the tempo, switching up the power of the punches. Israel, for the most part, keeps things fairly light for his size and his strength, I think. For a 185-pound guy, it doesn't look like a lot of his shots are incredibly damaging, but this is a skill. Do not get me wrong. Being in a fight, having somebody trying to take your head off and deciding, instead of going through, trying to knock them out, you're just gonna tag them. You're gonna tag them. That takes confidence in yourself. And very important is your confidence in your defense, because if I am throwing hard and I hit somebody, I'm gonna move them. I'm gonna make them scared. If I'm just touching them, I'm constantly just touching away, I need to be ready at all times to move back, to roll, to move my feet, because those counter shots are gonna be coming a little bit more often because these shots are not as scary. And once again, guys, the easy drill for training this, for making yourself better, and you want to be more like Izzy in this situation, is don't, even when you're shadow boxing, let's say shadow, instead of me, which I often do, kind of power, I'm trying to always work hard. Just touch. See if you can pick the tempo up and down. I'm touching, and then a couple hard shots, and then touch, and one hard shot, back to touching. The tempo change is incredibly important if you want to strike like him. The muscles stay loose on the lighter shots, fists are closed, so his hand is protected, but he's not clenching his body, he's not exhausting himself. This is one of those drills that, again, like many of the things that I'm talking about with him, they seem basic, but it's much easier said than done. And the final point for today, guys, is looking at Izzy's cross. This cross that he has is spectacular. As we just mentioned, he doesn't always commit a lot of power to it. It is deceptive. But with these little gloves, you don't need loads of power. And he does something which is so interesting, and not many people do it. When he throws his cross, we already talked about his ability to fake. That's amazing. But when he throws his cross, he doesn't have his hand right here, like most people do. Protect the head. He keeps his hands out here. Because he keeps his hands out here, his cross comes from this distance to this distance so much faster. His hip rotation is not enormous. He doesn't launch himself in. He doesn't drop his weight down. His body stays upright. His hands are out, and he just touches. Just from there, I love this cross. I love his ability to just be here, be touching away, utilize his footwork, utilize his fakes, and then boom, touch somebody. And like we said, because of the small gloves and just him being at 185 pounds, he has enough power after landing a few of these to put guys down. So it's important for you guys to remember that not every punch always needs to come from here. It doesn't need to be this kind of shot, especially if you haven't developed your style or you're looking to expand it. For myself, I've already had 40 plus fights. I am very set in who I am. Making changes to my striking style is fairly difficult for me, but if you are newer and you are trying to adapt your style or just change it up, make some adjustments, this is something that's spectacular to try and work on. If I have a target, I get myself just out of this range here. I'm not able to touch. Now when I throw my cross, because I'm able to get a little bit more hip leverage, I can get those few inches through. And again, like we already talked about, my hands are not here. This is much easier for somebody to see coming. His body motion, when he throws the cross, it's so minimal, and it's so difficult for people to see it coming because they're worried about the low kick with the hip pumps, they're worried about the jab with him faking, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, with no indication that he's changing, it's just bump. And then again, back to normal, he's working around, he's doing his thing, his hip pumps, his hands are all over the place, he's faking, he's touching, and boom. When you look at all these points I said today and you put them together as a whole, they work so well together. Individually, I'm not in love with them. I'm not going, oh, this is something that I have to add into my arsenal. But all together, they make a very, very dangerous style. And there are many more things to talk about Israel. There's many spectacular things he's good at, but that's why I picked these 5 things that they wrap up so nicely and they create such a unique fighting style that is effective. As I always say on my channel, guys, train hard, and I hope to see you back on the Modern Martial Artist again soon.